Welcome to Breaking Sales, a podcast dedicated to helping you have tough, meaningful, and rewarding conversations with your prospects and clients. In meaningful, what we mean is these are the conversations you truly feel like you are the prospect or client's conversational peer. There's no anxiousness or uncertainty holding you back. You feel a sense of calm and confidence in asking the tough questions. Not thrown off by the bad news, and you expect the prospect to think about and invest into the conversation as much as you do. On Breaking Sales, we use the filter of psychology and innate human behavior to deconstruct the many misleading sales approaches that actually work against your efforts to build trust and close the business. Let's get started. Here's one of the most important yet toughest questions I've had to ask myself regarding my career. Is the success I've had due to my skill, behavior, talent, and persistence? Or is it due to something else like being in the right place at the right time? Think about your own sales career. When you've closed deals a certain way for years, it's easy to credit your own skills for every win and blame the market, the prospect, or bad timing for every loss. This perspective can make it very difficult to be objective and identify the areas needed to improve and evolve. I can remember being a top sales professional in my early days, and I can also remember getting my ass handed to me when trying to start this business. The difficult times helped me reflect back on what enabled my early success. Truth be told, it was a combo of persistence and timing, and not so much skill. This ability to question our success does not come easy. It takes work, but it often leads to great insight into how we can get ourselves to a whole other level. It's a powerful and fantastic catalyst for humility and change, and that's exactly the topic I discussed today with our guest. Dr. Annie Duke is a cognitive scientist, former professional poker player, and a best-selling author of several books, including Thinking in Bets and Quit: The Power of Knowing When to Walk Away. Today, she's talking to us about the mental habits that affect our decision-making and why it can be so hard for us to see them clearly. Let's get started. Annie, it's great to have you on. It is.
Well, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and I think maybe for our listeners, because your background is so interesting, and I had a chance to go through your TED Talk and write the different other podcasts and so forth, and then your books and all that. Maybe share a little bit about your background first for our listeners.
Sure. So, my background is going to sound very zigzaggy, but then I'll tie it into a nice bow at the end, I promise. So, I started off my adult life at the University of Pennsylvania, getting my PhD in cognitive science. And cognitive science at the time was relatively new. It was really kind of this interdisciplinary approach to thinking about how do we build models of the world? How do we as human beings understand the world and experience the world and process the world? So I was doing that for 5 years, very far along, had my dissertation work done and was out on the job market, as a matter of fact, and starting to do job talks when I had a chronic illness that became pretty acute in my last year of graduate school. And I found myself needing to take some time off. So I had to withdraw from my job search. And the academic calendar is seasonal. So I was planning to go back out on the job market the next year. But I'd been at UPenn on a National Science Foundation fellowship, and it turns out that when you take a leave of absence from school, you take a leave of absence from your fellowship. And I came from a single income school teacher family household, so I needed money. And at that time, I started playing poker to make money. Now, I just want to kind of just set the stage super quickly, because I think that since 2002, which was really when the World Series of Poker and that kind of thing started airing, and you sort of saw it, it was ubiquitous on ESPN and whatnot, where you could really watch poker on television. This was in the 90s. So in the 90s, there really wasn't poker on TV. People didn't think of it as a profession. They thought about it as a vice. If you told someone you were a professional poker player, you might as well be telling them you were a drug dealer or a gambling addict at the least, because they didn't actually believe you. So, the question then is like, how on earth did I, a graduate student, like an egghead from UPenn, end up playing poker, and what I thought was going to be in the meantime? And it was because my brother had become a degenerate long before me. In the early 80s, he had gone to New York, actually to go to college, although he ended up deferring and not going. And he was studying chess. He was really into chess, and he started playing poker, and he became very good at it. And by the age of 23, he had made the final table of the main event of the World Series of Poker. So he had been doing it for 10 years before. And I had watched him play a lot, and I kind of knew something about poker from watching him and having him talk about it. So he was the one who actually suggested, look, why don't you play poker in the meantime? Which really made a lot of sense, because I wasn't at that time quitting academics. I was going to go back to it, and I needed something to do in the meantime. Well, I remember the first month I played poker, I made $2,800. I have a journal that says so, because I would record all that stuff. And at the time, the starting salary for a professor was $2,300 a month. So I just kind of started off with a leg up, because I had this expert who was really helping me. And you know what? I just loved it. I loved the problem. I loved the game of it. Like, we were a big games playing family. Even if we didn't play poker, we played all sorts of other card games and Scrabble and chess. And it's kind of what we did as social time for our family. So it felt very, I don't know, it kind of felt like coming home for me to be playing poker. I'm very competitive, and I love the competitiveness of it, but I actually really loved trying to solve the game. Because the game is really just kind of this exercise in how do you deal with making decisions, very quick, fast decisions in real time, where the stakes are just really high. There's a lot of luck in the short term, and you don't have a lot of information, right? Because I get to see my cards, but I don't get to see my opponent's cards. And I certainly don't know the cards that are going to come in the deck. So that was just I love that as kind of an intellectual exercise. So I ended up not going back to graduate school. I moved to Las Vegas. By the late 90s, I was the winningest woman in the history of the game. That is not true anymore, I just want to say. But at the time I was, did very well at the World Series of Poker, started playing cash games, had 4 children along the way. And then this weird thing happened, which was in 2002. It went from oh, what are you, a gambling addict or a drug dealer or something? When you told somebody you were a poker player, to poker was on television. And I had a great brand. I went to 2 Ivy League schools, and I had 4 children. I was a mom. And so I just kind of think people sort of like the story that I had to tell. So I got some attention from that. And what it came along with that was that I started getting asked, at first mostly in finance, but then it kind of extended to all aspects of business, including marketing teams, as a matter of fact, to come and talk to them about the way that poker might inform their thinking about decision-making under uncertainty and risk and that kind of thing. And I did that for 10 years. I would do that. I was doing consulting, and I was talking to businesses about how they could think about risk. And in particular, I was kind of merging this background that I had in cognitive science with this kind of real life version of what you study in cognitive science, which was poker playing, and really kind of transfer that knowledge to help businesses make better decisions. So in 2012, I retired from poker. I moved back east. So now I live on the East Coast, and I really had this desire to write a book that was kind of bringing together these 2 disciplines, like cognitive science and poker. And I did, and it was called Thinking in Bets, and did really well. I was very lucky. It was a national bestseller. And then I wrote another book called How to Decide, and then a book called Quit, which was really thinking about why folding because you have to fold your hands sometimes in poker, actually a lot. While folding is an underappreciated skill in real life, we think of quitting as a really bad thing. And I wanted to kind of rebrand it. On the side, I started doing very deep dive consulting with quite a few businesses, really kind of mainly in two spaces. One is investors and the other is startups. So, because the investors invest in startups. So I kind of think about both sides of that equation. Continue to do talks in the middle of my fourth general audience book, and founded a nonprofit called the Alliance for Decision Education, where we're actually trying to bring this kind of like decision science that I've been so steeped in into K through 12 education. And in 2023, I actually finished my PhD. So that was fun. So people are like, whoa, you were kind of all over the place. But what I always tell people is like, I'm such a one trick pony. Like the only thing that I've ever thought about is decision making under uncertainty, whether that was my studies in cognitive science, what I was doing in poker, the work that I do with businesses, what I write about, what our nonprofit is trying to teach kids in terms of skilling them up in decision making. And so I've been doing that my whole life, just in different ways.
So I appreciate you going through all that. Now, jumping into it, there was several topics that were very compelling. There was one in particular, though. So, when you think about it, what we do is we do high performance sales, I'll call it training, but we're teaching people how to have better conversations and become more resilient within the conversations, within the framework and boundaries of sales. And inevitably, and this is what brought me to this idea of motivated reasoning that I know you spoke of. There's always a large population within any one of our workshops where I know they've had success. And because they've had success, I think sometimes it's human nature for us to, all of us, to at times resist new ideas or resist the idea that we could get better, resist this idea that there's more to us. There's another whole level to go or two levels to go. And I'd love to talk to you a little bit about that because I think it would really help our listeners get a little bit more grounded on, are they really giving themselves a chance to truly get better and bring out the best of themselves?
Yeah. Okay. That's such there's so much depth there. So let's talk about this. So first of all, there's something in one of the strongest biases in cognitive science, and one that you see at the poker table big time, is called self-serving bias. And self-serving bias basically goes like this. If I have a bad result, it's because of luck. So I didn't close the sale because the decision maker that I was dealing with all of a sudden left, right? Like, that's not my fault, right? Like, I didn't close the sale because there was a huge contraction in the market, and people had revenues went down, and procurement just sort of went away, and like none of those are your fault.
Well, like I didn't close the sale because the CEO has a relationship with the incumbent.
With somebody else, not my fault.
Somebody else, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Exactly. But when things go your way, it's always your fault. Right? So nobody ever closed a sale, and I'm sure you know this, where it's like, oh, I got really lucky because I knew the CEO from high school. Right? Like they're not saying things like that. They're like, I did a great job. And it's always like, I did a great job and I brought people in at the right time and I had, schmoozed them in the right way and I sold them and I had the great pitch, and it's always because of you. So you see this at the poker table all the time. When you listen to poker players who have walked away from a table, every hand they lost was because they got unlucky. And every hand they won is because they played great. Now, that it is, we can think about that as a form of motivated reasoning, right? So motivated reasoning is just a more sort of social psychology term for this cognitive phenomenon, which is that our reasoning is motivated toward a particular goal. And that goal in general is to confirm the things that we already believe to be true. That is generally what our goal is in the way that we reason. You can see this in politics all the time, right? Like, depending on what your belief set is, the way that you interpret the information that you see is going to be in service of confirming the things that you already believe to be true. Why is that? Well, because we really reason in a way that is to protect our identity. And part of, if we think about like, what is our identity? It's the things that we believe to be true, like over time. And so if I were to find out that a belief that I hold is not true, that kind of breaks that consistency. And now I'm faced with two choices, right? I can either accept that I was wrong, or I can rationalize that away to protect my identity. I get those two choices. So when you're encountering somebody who's had success, you're kind of fighting against this problem, which is, well, of course they're going to interpret the success as because of them, because that really, and I think this is like the sort of broad way to think about it, is that everything that we do, we want to advance our self-narrative in a positive way. That is what we are trying to do. We would like to think well of ourselves. We want to have a positive narrative of our lives, right? So I had a bunch of success. I want that to be because I'm great, because that advances the narrative in a positive way. If I say it was because of luck, that's bad. Or if I compare myself to some counterfactual, some other version of me who is doing something different, and that person would have done better, then that's really hard for me to accept. I don't like to accept that. So this is what you're talking about, right? Like someone comes in, they've been very successful. They don't want to hear what you have to say, because if they were to accept that there might be something that could generate more ROI, right? That there's some other version of the world where they could have been doing even better, they have to accept that what they were doing was suboptimal. And that sort of translates like to a mistake, or I didn't do well. And all of a sudden they get a ding to this narrative, right? Like this kind of positive view that they're trying to create of themselves. That's what you're fighting against.
Yeah. And it's the mistake piece, right? Because they've had success, and then the idea of doing something new or different and risking that mistake just becomes too much.
I would actually flip that and say it's not about risking the mistake. It's that if they go and try something different, they have to acknowledge that the thing they were doing might have been a mistake. I think that's actually, I think we need to flip it, right? So there's kind of two things working here, right? There's that problem. If I say, no, I'm willing to try something different, then it's sort of acknowledging that the thing that I was doing might not have been the best thing, and perhaps was a mistake. So that's incredibly hard. The other thing is that we just have something called ambiguity aversion, which is, let's imagine that the thing we're doing isn't even working. We'd prefer that to something new that might work or might not. So this goes into something called loss aversion, which was put forward by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Daniel Kahneman just recently passed, Nobel laureate in economics. And basically what loss aversion is this, that when we're thinking about some path that we might take, we over index on the possible outcomes that might be bad. So, if you're thinking about like a new investment in the market, you'll be like, but what if it doesn't work out? What if I lose all my money, right? Like you're trying a new sales strategy, like, okay, but the thing I'm doing is fine. What if this new thing doesn't work out? And then I'm going to feel really bad if it doesn't work out. If I lose a client, I lose a sale because of it. So we just worry, like, we worry too much about the possible losses that might be associated with a path.
I could think of a really good example, I think, of
Yeah.
this loss aversion you're talking about, right? A sales professional is in a big meeting. They're talking to some C-suite, a decision maker, and they know there's a question that they want to ask or that they should ask, but they've never had to ask it or they've never asked it before. And so they
Gary.
start second guessing themselves, and they don't think necessarily about what could be gained in the conversation. They think more about
What
what
could
if I,
be lost?
right? What
That's
if I,
exactly right.
yeah, what if I don't
That's
ask it right? What if it comes
Yeah.
out wrong? What if they misinterpret
What
it?
if this ruins the sale? Right? Okay. So now here's the really interesting thing about loss aversion that goes along with this problem that you're talking about. Loss aversion is asymmetrically recruited into decisions that are new, right? So this kind of goes along with this ambiguity aversion. We don't like the devil we don't know, right? So it's a new question that you're thinking about asking. So that's the new thing, right? The thing you're already doing may not be working. The questions that you're asking may not be closing the sale. They might not be moving the ball forward. But those, we aren't thinking about what we might be losing to those because it's the thing we've always done. So it's this issue of like kind of what we call omission versus commission. Like when you do things SOP, we don't think about it as making a decision. We think because you're just doing the thing that you already did. Like you've sort of always done it that way. And so we don't think about the loss in the same way. And part of the reason why we don't think about the loss in the same way is because if you think about having a bad result and like going into a postmortem and people saying to you like, oh, you had this bad result, what happened? And you said, I followed procedure. Nobody's getting mad at you. So we aren't really thinking about like, what is that blame? What is that kind of like hit to the self narrative going to be if I have a bad outcome from doing the thing that I've always done? Because it is the thing that you've always done. And so you just kind of are like, well, that's not going to feel so bad to me because what could I do? What could I do? I followed the rules. Whereas if you're switching to something new, and things don't work out, loss aversion becomes like the big problem. So what that means is that you can be asking questions, you can be using a sales strategy that's really suboptimal. You could even kind of know it. And you still won't switch because what if that thing doesn't work out? Even though that new thing might actually have higher ROI.
Yeah, I think I got this in prepping for our conversation, and I don't have the wording right, but as a Jeff
Okay.
Yass, is that the right pronunciation?
Yeah. Yeah.
The biggest risk we have is when you have a losing strategy and you think you have a winning one.
Yes.
Is that right? I got the quote.
It's close enough. It's to think you're winning when you're actually losing. Yes. So, but the thing about that is that, there's, first of all, we're hard at spotting when the thing we're doing is losing, but then we have to understand, like, what does it mean to be losing? Right. So, let's imagine I'm investing in the market and my strategy is earning me 4% a year. Right? Like over the last 3 years, I earned 4%. Well, okay, but it's like I have to compare that. Like it's a 17% market. So like what I've been doing in the past that has led to success, I may not know that that's a losing strategy because I'm comparing it to what if I had closed 0 sales, and I'm not comparing it to what would the world have looked like if I had done this other thing? Because that might have been a lot better. And like, it's just hard for us to wrap our heads around the counterfactuals. Number one, like our brains aren't good at that. But number two, it's this problem of the motivation. Like, what motivation do I have to say, well, maybe this other thing is better? Because then I don't get to feel so good about myself anymore.
That's the part I think is so important. Where we have this self-awareness. And I'd love to hear your thoughts because I know self-awareness is not a given. It's
No,
for most
no,
of
it's
us,
not.
it's
Yeah.
very difficult, right?
Right.
But to have that self-awareness in the moment to realize, wait a minute, I'm reverting to what I know. Not only that, I'm telling myself I've been successful with it in the past, but yet if I really break it down, I don't know if that's the reason I've been successful.
Right.
If I'm going to be truly honest about it and I'm going to be objective, I don't know that that's the reason why I've had this other success.
I think this is a great example. I had a client who was, they provided a service to early stage startups. And right in the middle of 2020, they implemented these new marketing strategies. Okay. So they were actually tracking like their inbound inquiries. That's what the marketing strategies were meant to do. They were meant to increase their inbound inquiries. And lo and behold, it was like flat. And then they implement these new marketing strategies. And you look at 2021 and 22, and their inbound top of funnel like explodes, like goes up by 2.5. So their marketing strategies made that happen, right? Like, I mean, this is the thing, like, right? Like, well, of course, right? Like, look, it was flat. We did this thing and then it was amazing. But this is where you have to get really thoughtful about, like, well, just because the data makes me feel good, right? Just because the data is satisfying to what my narrative might be, I have to explore other alternatives. Like, did this actually have to do with me? Because by the way, if it went down, I would certainly be exploring that. Well, what are the other explanations? Maybe it's not the marketing strategies that made my sales go down. What else? What's happening? Like you'd be generating all these alternative explanations. But as soon as you see it go up, you say, done. Right? Like obviously I'm great. Right. So so they showed me this and I looked at it and I said, okay, like Ted Lasso premiered at the same time too. Do you think that made your sales go up or your inbound increase go up? And they were like, no, but like, because there's no explanatory satisfaction there, right? Like, it's like, okay, like that narrative. Right. Thank you. It's in my next book. So I said, okay, but so if I just say like if that, then this isn't telling you that. So like, let's think about what else could be happening here. Well, I don't know. A big thing happened in 2020. It was called COVID. And I said, can we just look at like how many new businesses got started? Like, I'd just like to understand that. Because maybe we're just supposed to have a lot more inquiries. And you know what? A lot more new businesses got started. In fact, about 2.5 times from 20 to 21. So that I think that's like just a really good example. Like you have a banner sales year. Like, what did the economy look like? That's a good question, right? Like, was it a bad economy? Was it a good economy? Because if the economy was booming in the sector that you're selling into, you should have a very different thought about how much you had to do with it. Like, here's another example, right? And like, I see this all the time in sales. Like, let's imagine that like I'm a scrappy new startup and I'm selling something that, like in early stage startups, a lot of times you have to explain to people what it is. That's kind of the point of innovation, right? Like people, you may be selling something that people don't quite know they need yet. Like you have to explain to them why they need it. They might not understand what it does, right? And like this is sort of like there were a lot of SaaS companies that were like this, whatever you're selling. And you don't have like the brand awareness. People who might decide to enter into a contract with you don't have the same kind of cover. If I'm buying some software from Microsoft, people aren't going to get mad at me. But if I'm doing something new, right, this is the loss aversion thing, people might get mad at me. It's like a harder sale. So let's imagine that I'm looking at some superstar salesperson who's been at Adobe. Well, I am going to have the tendency, and certainly that salesperson is going to have the tendency to say, like, I'm a superstar salesperson. Look at how great I am. Look at the amount of business that I've closed. Except how much of that is that you're selling something from Adobe?
Thanks for listening to Breaking Sales. If you're enjoying this episode, you might also enjoy episode 192, the questions your prospects can't ask themselves. Yeah, go back to something you said, Annie, real brief, because it made me think about this example. So a lot of our listeners, right, they're trying to displace an incumbent.
Right.
There's an incumbent most of the time.
Yeah.
And so our listeners are trying to compete against the incumbent and pretty much get the incumbent fired so that they can earn the business, right? Now,
you should be trying to do that because the incumbent isn't going to be innovating, by the way.
Right. But what you said was interesting, right? Because the decision maker in that situation, they're going to have a self-serving bias. What would you recommend at that point, knowing that, right? Because that decision maker is going to have a hard time being objective.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because so what you're fighting against is really essentially this loss aversion thing, right? Like they're going to be much more tolerant of making a bad choice with the known thing, right? Than making a choice that even though it's the better choice, it might not work out with an unknown thing. Because I guarantee you, if they go with the unknown thing and it doesn't work out, they're going to have to defend themselves. But if they go with Adobe, it's going to be, well, what could I do? It was Adobe. And everybody's going to say, sure. Right? Like, that's not going to be a problem for them.
Yeah, and I'm wondering out loud, is there anything conversationally the sales professional can do, right? Because most sales professionals are going to try to double and triple down. Hey, but we're better, and we offer this, and we can give you these types of terms, and if you make this move, we can throw in this I don't know, these pots and pans over here. We'll throw them in for free, right? But that doesn't go anywhere.
Here we go. So, this is the first thing that I would say about this is that for yourself and for anybody that you're talking to, you need to understand that inside of them, there is a street fight happening between the present version of them and the future version of them. So, simplest way to think about this. I have pledged that I am going to live a healthier lifestyle and really try to clean up my diet, but there's a cupcake sitting in front of me. There's now a fight occurring, right? Like all the future versions of me would prefer me not to eat the cupcake. But me now, I'm like cupcake all day, right? So I'm having a fight, right? Like future Annie and present Annie are now in a fight with each other. When we think about the person who doesn't entertain these new sales strategies that they could try to implement in an experimental way and be open to the idea that while what they have done has won compared to some sort of benchmark, that maybe they could have done even better, right? That is a battle. The reason why they're not open to that is a battle between present them and future them. Present them wants to protect their identity in that moment. Future them would prefer that they entertain that possibility, because if it turns out that it's true, that there is a better way, future them is going to thrive, but present them is going to be sad, right? So it's so perplexing from the outside looking in. Why won't this person entertain it? Why won't they even try it? They could experiment with it. They could see how it goes. Why aren't they open to this? And it's because of this street fight occurring. And what happens in that street fight is the present version of them that doesn't want their identity to take that hit is going to have a tendency to win that battle, even though it's better for them long run to be open to the coaching and to be open to the new strategies and to be open to the idea. Okay, so now let's take this into this problem. I don't think there's very many people that you could talk to that don't acknowledge that as you think about kind of the arc and history of, let's say, software, that incumbents, because they have become enterprises, because of that, this is the innovator's dilemma, right? That generally they tend to fall behind in innovation, and startups very often are going to be more agile. They're going to offer more new and interesting stuff. They're probably going to be more responsive to the customer. And they're going to provide things that the incumbent can't provide, because the incumbent is protecting its legacy product and not actually trying stuff that's new. By the way, for the same reason that your salesperson isn't open to your strategies. They don't want to disrupt the thing that's already worked for them, even though in the long run it might be better for them to do that.
Or they don't even know if it's actually the thing that worked.
Right. But like even you have this history of like Sony having the opportunity to develop something that was like the iPod, and they said, no, we'll disrupt the Walkman if we do that. Right. Like they actually kind of knew that this other thing, this sort of digital version would be better, but they had like a legacy product, and they were like, we don't want to mess that up.
You made me think about that. I can't remember his name, but it was the founder, the engineer and the founder of the BlackBerry did the same thing. Well, he thought that it wasn't going to be important to be able to get content directly to the device.
Right. Because they're trying to protect the device. But from the outside looking in on that decision, you're like, well, that's ridiculous. Like, you're huge. You have a team, have this one team go innovate that stuff. And then also, but they won't do that because, again, like even a company is in that street fight. Because why? A company is made up of individuals who are all in that street fight, and they're trying to like protect their turf and their identity, and they don't want to disrupt themselves. Okay. All right. So the person that you're talking to knows this, right? They know that it's probably better to go with the new thing if the new thing is really solving a problem for them. But what they're afraid of is that they're going to get in trouble. They're afraid of that. So how do we deal with that? This has to do with empathy. You have to really understand that this is going on inside of them. Instead of having a conversation about the now, you have to have a conversation where you are working with them to imagine what it looks like in a year or two. That is what you have to do. Now, why is that so helpful? Well, we can think about the cupcake problem, right? If I can, instead of just battling, like, do I want this cupcake or not? If I can instead say, well, let me imagine like it's tomorrow, and I've woken up and I ate this cupcake, and I wake up tomorrow, like, how do I feel about that? So this is like this is just traveling a day ahead, right? Like
is that kind of like the example where I've heard people say before, nobody ever wakes up, right, wishing they had one more drink.
Right. Yes, that's exactly right. So now I'm going to just travel one day in the future and say, like, tomorrow, Annie, like, how is she going to feel about this cupcake? And like, now I can say, oh, I'm going to be pretty upset with myself that I actually ate this cupcake. All right. So, and then that's going to increase the chances that I don't eat the cupcake now. Okay. So what's happening here? It's pretty unique to human beings, this ability to do this mental time travel, particularly so far into the future. Like a pigeon, I think, can get about 9 seconds ahead. But human beings can go all the way past their own lifetimes. Like, I can imagine the future after I'm dead. Like, that's unique to us. That is very unique to us. And the reason why we're able to do that is because this type of mental time travel is occurring in our prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain. That's where, in fact, rational thought lives. And so when we start to imagine what is it like in a day, or what is it like in a week, or what is it like in a year or 2 years or 10 years, we're recruiting the prefrontal cortex. The present you. So the present you exists basically in the temporal lobe, specifically in the amygdala. And I'm sure people have heard about the amygdala. It's when you get really activated, like it's why bad news travels really fast, because the amygdala, that's the fight or flight, right? So like you're like, like you're hooked to the news because it's bad news. You're hooked to social media because it's getting the amygdala going. Now, the amygdala really messes your decision making, right? It makes you make very irrational decisions. But here's the amazing news. the prefrontal cortex has an inhibitory relationship with the amygdala and vice versa. So if the amygdala is activated, it makes it so that your prefrontal cortex doesn't work very well. And I'm sure you felt that when you're like really angry and you're like, I can't even think straight, right? That's not a thing you say. That's actually just true, because it's actually making it, it's actually inhibiting the activation of your prefrontal cortex. But if you can activate your prefrontal cortex, you can deactivate your amygdala. So what's happening when you actually start to think about the future, when you actually do that in a deliberate way, as part of your process, is that you're getting the person out of that kind of battle that's occurring and stopping them from thinking about the now and starting them to think about the future. So if I'm having a conversation with someone where I'm trying to get them out of the kind of short-termism that is going to be counter to what's good for me, and frankly, what's good for them, I'm going to have them think about like, well, let's think about what this looks like in a year. Right? Like, what are the problems that you're having? What are the competitive advantages that your competitors are going to have who are maybe going to be more innovative about this? What do you think the innovation, say the innovation like arc of Adobe is going to be compared to us, right? Like, you're really getting them to think about like, what does a bad version of the world look like? What does the good version of the world look like in either of these circumstances?
But the key is, right, you're not telling them.
No.
You're asking them to get them to think and reflect forward on it.
You have to do it that way because you have to get them to be recruiting that part of your brain. And telling someone is not the same as having them come to that answer themselves. And here's the fact, right? Like, if you are doing something where you are trying to be disruptive, I assume that you believe in what you're doing. So you have to trust that and let that help them to work through the problem, right? What is this going to look like in the future if you go with the incumbent, if you go or stay with the incumbent versus if you switch to us? Think about that in comparison to your competitors. Like, what do you think your competitors are going to be doing? What do you think the competitive advantages either way might be to you? And you have to trust that. I assume you've given them a demo. I assume they know what the deck is. I assume they know what it is that you do and what it is that you offer. And you have to trust them to be able to come up with those answers themselves because you should really believe in it.
So by asking them, you're helping them go from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex. By telling them that process isn't happening.
Yeah. Blah, 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 blah. Yes.
Right. I mean, because that's a big part of sales where a lot of sales professionals just revert to, let me tell you what's going to happen. Let me tell you how this is going to look for you. But the problem with doing that, even though you're right, I hate to say it, you're wrong because you have to help them through that. There's an actual process that their brain goes through.
Right. And then there's a wonderful thing that happens. So first of all, there's two great things that happen. Thing number one is that in hearing their answers, you actually gain a lot more information than if you just told them. And that is what a conversation is for, right? Like, you need to be gaining information about who it is that you're talking to so that you can better understand and build a model of what their wants and needs and desires and so on and so forth are. And that's going to just make it more likely that you're going to be able to actually sell the thing that you want to sell to them. So it becomes a really good informational tool. Also, because you get to understand, like, what are they thinking about? What are the things they're worried about? What are their concerns? And it's not like you can't like chime in. It's not like you can't offer your own thoughts as well, but you're going to get a lot more information by asking them instead of telling them. That's number one.
Yeah, no, keep going. Sorry.
Okay. Number two has to do with something called endowment. And this is really important. This is really important conceptually. And all I can tell you is this is so powerful in cognitive science. So what is endowment? Endowment is that we value something that we own much more than an identical thing that we don't own. I'm going to give you an example. If you go buy something from IKEA that you have to put together yourself, which you own, you are going to love that thing a lot more than if you just looked at something in a secondhand store, the same thing that someone else built. When you go to sell a car and you're looking at like Edmunds or Kelley Blue Book or whatever to try to figure out what you're supposed to sell it for, you obviously think you're supposed to be at the top end of that, right? Because like your car is amazing. But if you were to be buying an identical car, you're like, this is outrageously priced because you don't own it.
Let me guess. And that's what we do with ideas.
That is what we do with ideas. We love ideas that we own, which means ideas we generated, that we created, much more than identical ideas that we did not generate.
This isn't like the movie Inception, is it?
No, no. but this is it. I can't emphasize to you like how important this is conceptually. Okay. So like when I'm coaching teams, right? Like if I'm coaching like senior leadership, one of the things that I tell them is that separate and apart from the fact that you should be getting ideas from your teams because it's your team because it's going to help you to actually understand the decision space better. Hopefully they're going to generate creative alternatives that you're not thinking about. They're going to think about different counterfactuals that you haven't explored. Maybe they're going to think about different ways that you could get to a bad outcome or a good outcome or creative alternatives or whatever it might be. Separate from the informational component is that they are now endowed to the decision because they are part of it. They have generated their thoughts, their feedback, their input, so that when you have to make a decision, they are going to be much more bought in and much more likely to be willing to execute on the decision than if you just by fiat say, here's what we're doing and tell them, right? Even if you're already very sure of what it is that you need to do, get feedback from them so that they are endowed to it, so that they become owners. So they become owners of the decision. Now, we can take that into you as a sales professional, get the lead, get the person that you're talking to be an owner of this decision with you, to own the idea of what it is that you're selling can do for them. And the best way to do that is make them generate it themselves. And that means you have to ask them about this stuff, not tell them.
And if I go back to something that you said, right? The amygdala gets triggered typically, right? When we hear something we don't want to hear. Fair?
Yes.
Right.
For sure. Yes. We become very defensive.
Yeah. And then when that happens, right, we just kind of shut down, right? You have to learn to, we talked about it earlier, prior to the call, detach is what we would say, or compartmentalize, right? You have to learn how to take that information and not, I will say, label it bad.
Right.
Maybe just try not to put a label on it. Because if that amygdala is ignited, it's going to be hard to slow down and ask the questions and help that person think forward, because you're going to be so wrapped up in your own brain about what the cause and effect is of what you just heard.
Yeah, I think that I would add a tiny bit of nuance to that, which is just this. I think it's incredibly hard to achieve detachment in the sense of not having our ego or our identity attached to certain things, to sort of be deriving that sense of, that positive sense of self that comes from things. I mean, you know, you could go become a monk in Tibet and go for that. But I think that that's actually quite hard for people. So what I would say is that you want to think about, like, how do I make it so that the way that I'm reacting to information is the same as if I were detached from the thing that I want to detach from, without actually achieving detachment from my own identity, which I think is just really hard. And I think it's to shift what it is that you're deriving your positive self-narrative from. So the example of that would be, like, I'll give you one from poker, right? Like, okay, so poker players naturally, well, when they win, they're like, I'm amazing. I outplayed everybody. I'm so great. And when they lose, it's like, oh, I got so unlucky. That was so bad. Okay. So, and what you can see that kind of like identity production in there, right? Like when I lose, I don't want it to be my fault, because then I can't advance my self-narrative in a positive way. And if I win, I do want it to be because of me, because I want to advance my self-narrative in a positive way. So, okay. So How do I solve for that? Well, I still want the positive self narrative. I have to shift what it is that gives me the positive self narrative. And I really like to lean into comparison. So I know that future Annie is better off if she figures out that she won a hand because she got lucky. I know that. And by the way, I've won lots of hands because I got lucky. That's just definitionally true in a game that has a lot of luck, right? So I know I'm better off if I actually figure that out. Because the thing that I don't want to do is play a hand really poorly, win because I got lucky, and think that it was because I played well, and then go repeat the poor play, thinking that, right? Horrible. All right. So I know future Annie is better off if I can just recognize that I did not actually play that hand well. And if I lose a hand, it's the same thing. Like if I actually didn't play well, I would like to actually know that so that I can change what I did, right? So I can actually become better in the future. So future Annie needs that to happen. So I can do this kind of time travel, right? And say what's better for future Annie. That's one thing that I can do. The other thing I can do, which I think is a little more fundamental, which is having recognized that problem, I can say, well, I'm a person who recognizes my mistakes. So when I hear other people saying, oh, I got so unlucky, I can feel superior to them because I don't do that. When I hear people talking about how great they played, I get to feel superior to them, because I'm like, no, because I actually think about when I won, and I really actually am very eager to find out if I actually played poorly. So I'm kind of shifting. I get to still feel good about myself because a lot of the feeling good about yourself is comparison, right? It's comparison to other people, right? Do I feel like I'm doing better than other people? Is a comparison to a benchmark, like in investing. Did I make $0 or more than $0, right? Like there's something that we're always referring to. There's something we're always comparing to. And you can see that in people who are like, oh, I can't wait. If I ever had a Honda Accord, I would have really made it. And then you get a Honda Accord and your next door neighbor has a Mercedes. And then you don't feel so good about the Honda Accord anymore, right? Like, so we live in comparison. Change how you compare yourself. Change what it is that you're comparing to somebody who recognize it, like who's eager to find their mistakes, who wants to try other ways to do things, right? Do you know what I mean? Like who's willing
Because
to
that takes courage. We know that. It takes strength. It takes courage. What you're saying is dig into it though.
Yeah, like lean into it and say, but that's my tribe. Right? Like most people, their tribe is, I'm so great. Look at me. I closed so much business because I'm so awesome. And if I lost a sale, it wasn't my fault. Okay, that's their tribe. But I'm in a different tribe. I'm in the tribe of like, maybe it was my fault. Maybe I didn't win that deal because I'm so great. Maybe what I'm doing is good, but there's a better way. And I would be so mortified to find out, like, if I suddenly became omniscient, that there was a better way to do it. And I hadn't actually tried to find out what it was. That would kill me.
And you could go all the way back to that cupcake example that you have, which is you can be one of two tribes. You can be the tribe that has the cupcake, right? And you're part of that tribe. And you felt good because that cupcake tasted really good in that moment. Right? Or you're going to be the part of the tribe that wakes up the next morning and says, you know what, I didn't have that cupcake. And I actually feel good about the fact I didn't have that cupcake.
And then you can actually feel even better about yourself if you're at a restaurant and everybody orders dessert and you don't. And now you're like, I'm a resistor because I'm taking care of future me.
It's shifting your comparison. And then part of that is, what are you identifying then within the comparison?
Exactly.
Interesting. So like in sales, right? It's very common for lots of sales professionals to call themselves relationship salespeople. What that means though is, and they know it, is that they don't ask the tough questions. They like people, they connect so well with people, and they have great bonds with people, but they won't ask the tough questions. And what happens is they end up having the longest sales cycles because they never really get to helping that decision maker. But it's, again, right, it's going to be, what do you identify yourself with? Do you identify yourself as a relationship salesperson, or maybe I'll call it a disruptor, right? I
Yeah.
don't have a better word for it right now, but that would be part of it.
Well, that would be part of it. And I think also one of the things, again, in terms of this sort of tribal identity, is how focused are you on opportunity cost, right? Like, you don't want to live in the discomfort of asking difficult questions. Okay, so that's like that street fight between present you and future you. And then you want to ask what is that costing you? Well, it's costing you two things. One is your sales cycle's really long. Okay, so that's a big cost. But the other thing, and this is really important, is that it's not just that it's taking too long for you to close that sale, but like that's all time, effort, attention that you could put putting into other opportunities. So it's costing you twice. So that opportunity cost, right? Like, what's the opportunity cost of like all this extra time that I'm putting in because I don't want to live in the discomfort of asking difficult questions, and I've defined myself as somebody who doesn't do that. So just to give you an idea, like I would one of my clients was fundraising. Their venture clients. They were fundraising for LPs, right? So that's sales. And they would just have these like really long cycles with trying to get to a yes or a no with their LPs. And the reason was that they never asked a forcing question. Why wouldn't they ask a forcing question? Because the answer might be no. And that doesn't feel good in the moment. But it's really good for you to find out earlier that the answer is going to be no rather than later, because that's time that you can spend developing other LPs, right? Like it's a no-brainer. Like I could, so basically what we did was we went through the cycle and we said, okay, so what are the key kind of gates that you got to get this person through? And it was things like you have to get them to open the data room, for example, right? Like you need to get them to want to get references, so on and so forth, right? So we figured out like what are those gates, and then we also figured out just kind of like what's a reasonable number of conversations or meetings before they ought to be in that gate. So now we have that, and what would happen is that we just had preset rules. After X number of meetings, you offer them access to the data room. If they say no, you're done. You put them into some cycle where you're doing kind of automatic outreach. If they say yes, you check, you see, are they actually in the data room, so on and so forth. How long do they have access to the data room before you say to them, would you like references? So we just changed it to forcing questions. Why are those questions really uncomfortable? Because the answer might be no. Right. But you should want to hear that because that frees you up, right? Like that's like the best thing that could ever happen to you, because now you know what the answer is. And you can put them into, hey, we're just going to do automatic outreach with those people. You don't tell them that, obviously, but you do that. And then now all of a sudden you can actually start to spend time on the high value, the higher value opportunities that you're trying to get to invest in your fund. So that's what we did. We just created these kind of like forcing moments, and now they have this real identity around that, right? That the way that they're handling that is like actually they think about it as opposed to trying to get to a yes. They actually have flipped the way they think about it, which is when I'm working with an LP, with a potential LP, I want to get to know as fast as I can. I want to understand if they're a no, because that allows me to get more yeses. Like the yeses, the higher value comes out of getting to know faster with the people who are no's. It's just that, again, in that street fight that's occurring, it doesn't feel good in the minute, even though it's really good for you in the long run.
Yeah, one of the rules that we have in our program with our clients is that if that client, in this case, if the prospect isn't willing to invest the effort into thinking forward about their future state, then there's a strong likelihood they're not ready to truly think through what change would look like for them.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not willing to do that, then you need to figure out how to go spend time somewhere else with someone who is more willing to think through that.
Right. Exactly.
So tell me a little about your recent book, Quit.
Well, so interestingly enough, Dan, we've already talked quite a bit about Quit. So look, here's the thing, like, and I find this so true of sales professionals in particular, that quit is just a dirty word, right? It's like you pursue that until the bitter end because you can always win the deal.
So it's like which one's more powerful, the art of persistence or the art of quitting?
I mean, so here's the thing. It's very interesting. For anyone over the age of 25, and certainly someone who's decided to go be a salesperson, I don't think you need more grit. Like, you're already too gritty. I can tell you that. Like, if you think about deals where the prospect has kind of finally at the end of the process said no, I would challenge you to think, like, did you actually know that a lot sooner before they actually said no? Because I'm guessing that's 100% of the time that's occurring, that their no was not a surprise to you and that you actually knew it a long time ago.
Your gut was telling you along the way.
Like, give me a break, right? It's not like, whoa, right? So the thing about grit is that it does get you to stick to things that are hard but worthwhile. That is true. But the problem is it also gets you to stick to things that are not worthwhile. And if you are continuing to pursue a lead, a prospect, which is a no, but you don't know it, or you're not acting on all the signs that say that it's a no, that's having too much grit. Right. So the thing about quitting is that, again, it's kind of what I said before. You want to get really good at understanding when you should stop things for two reasons. One, if you're doing something that isn't worthwhile, that's bad, right? Like, I'm stuck on a road and I'm not actually getting to where I want to go. But it's also bad in a second way, which is while you're stuck on that road, you can't be on other roads, right? So if I don't exit the highway, I can't get to a new route that might actually be better. And that's kind of what I was talking about with, like, the LPs, right? It's like, if you're continuing to pursue and have meetings with an LP that's a no, because you haven't done the forcing questions, right? Then that's time that you can't spend on a higher value prospect, which is bad. So if the true state of the world is no, you should want to know that and stop thinking like, oh, but there was this one time. Because you want to think about, like, oh, in general, right? Do I really want to be pursuing these deals where it's like 1% to close, or do I want to go find the ones that are 40 or 50 or 60% to close? Like, obviously, I prefer to be spending my time on those.
And if I go back to something you said earlier, right? The last thing you want to do is have grit when you have a bad poker hand.
Oh my gosh, no, you don't want to. That would be horrible. Yeah, you'll lose all your money, which is really bad. So what are the things that are causing us to not quit? Well, certainly endowment, right? Like, once we start down the path of a deal, we own it, right?
We get attached. Yeah, we get attached.
Right. That we have the identity piece, we have sunk costs, but then I'll have wasted all the time and effort I put into this. No, you won't. You already spent all that. Put your time and effort into something worthwhile. What's already happened has happened. That doesn't matter. If you wouldn't pursue this deal today, you shouldn't pursue it tomorrow, right? Like, that's kind of like, imagine that you had never been talking to this client before, and someone just told you, hey, I'm going to pop you in, and this is the state of things. You've had 7 meetings with the client and no decision maker has ever been in the room. Do you want me to hand that off to you? And I'm guessing the answer would be not in a million years. But having had the 7 meetings, your answer will be, yes, I know I can win this deal. Those two things should be in alignment. If you wouldn't take it from somebody else because you can see that it's a dog, right? Then you shouldn't continue to pursue it just because you're the one who had the 7 meetings. But this is what we do.
I think that's brilliant. If you wouldn't take it from someone else, then why are you keeping it?
Right. But you do that, right? Like, everybody does that. So I just want to say, like, I once finished a tennis match with a broken wrist. if you had asked me in advance, if you break your wrist in the middle of this tennis match, will you continue to play? I would have told you no. So, I mean, this is like, I know this stuff and I still do
Well,
it.
you
So we
did
all,
say you were competitive earlier.
I am competitive. I won the match, by the way. So, all right. So I actually did this with a team of sales professionals because what you have to do is, again, get into this, like, what about my future self? How do I think about what's good for me in the future? And one of the best ways to do that is actually think outside of being in the middle of a deal and say, look, let me think about what the signals might be that I could observe that would tell me that this is actually a no, so that I can acknowledge it and move on to something else and clear all this junk out of my funnel so I know what the true value actually is. And I can be spending my time on stuff that's actually worth my time, right? And I can go develop new leads, or I can spend time with higher value leads, right? So I can do those two things. And then pre-commit to your actions when you see those signals. Then make that part of your sales process. So when you're dealing with your sales leader, you now get to win in two ways, because you won the deal or because you followed what you had said you were going to. Because if they say to you, hey, wait, you're on your 7th meeting and you haven't had a decision maker in the room and you've pre-agreed that that's a really bad signal, well, now you're losing. So you get to win when you say, you know what? I was on my 3rd meeting and I couldn't get a decision maker in the room. So I quit. And then it's like, great, that's what we said you were going to do. So this is what I did with the sales team. I sent out a prompt to them. And this was, by the way, particularly exacerbated by any time that someone lost a deal, the CEO would pop into Slack and be like, what happened? Right? As opposed to opening themselves up to the possibility that perhaps it was a good thing that the deal was done.
Yeah, that
Anyway,
usually happens that way. It does.
yes, it's very bad to do that. If you're in leadership, please don't do that to your sales professionals. Okay, so this is what we did. We sent out, it was 40 ICs, an individual contributor, and we said this. Imagine you're pursuing a lead. You've been pursuing a lead through an RFP or RFI. It's 6 months later, and the deal is dead. So that's where we start them. Now, no, that should sound familiar because I'm asking them to think about the future, right? Okay. So imagine you're pursuing a deal that you got through an RFP or RFI, and 6 months later, the deal is dead. Looking back, you realize there were early signals that that was going to be the result that you ignored. What were they? So they came up with a lot of answers. I'll give you 3. One we already talked about. After 3 meetings, we couldn't get a decision maker in the room. That was 1. 2, so this was a SaaS company. 2 was they only wanted to know about price. So in other words, they didn't want a demo. All they asked us about was what our pricing was. 3 was the RFP or RFI seemed to be written with a competitor in mind. Like it was almost like the competitor wrote it. Yeah. Right. Like it seems like a competitor wrote it. Okay, so those were 3 of many, right? So I'll talk about the 3 of them. Okay, so now having gotten that list, we sent it back out to the ICs and said, okay, so if you saw these things, like what would you suggest that you should do? Like if somebody else came to you and said, this is the state of the world, like what would your advice to them be? So with the 3 meetings, can't get a decision maker in the room, was offer up executive alignment at the next meeting. Okay. And with that, we said, okay, so what if they say no? Then it was, well, you should kill the deal. And if they say yes, you say, great, we got a decision maker in the room. Good. Okay. But again, that's a forcing question. Right? Okay. They only wanted to talk about price. Didn't want a demo, didn't want anything else. They said, well, if that happens, you should just kill it yourself. No further required. Like you're clearly a stalking horse. Like just be done. So that was no. And then, the RFP RFI seemed to really be written by a competitor, or certainly with a competitor in mind. You should ask them, hey, are you working with this competitor? Like, are you working with this company? If the answer is yes, how far down the road are you with them? Like, just ask them these questions, like bluntly. And the thing is, you can't really lose to it. Like if they're really far down the road with them, it doesn't help for you not to know that. Right? Like, what are you losing to finding out the answer? You're not going to piss them off. It's like, it could just be, well, accidental.
It goes a little bit along with the card strategy we talked about earlier, where you said in the beginning of poker, right? You're doing things to see how others react because you're
Right.
trying to gain information. And in this
Yeah.
instance, right, you're asking these questions because you're just trying to gain information. Are you wasting your time, or is this
Or
going to be
you
worth it?
not. Right. Exactly. So with that one, it was, yes, we're very far down the road and we're just trying to talk to some other people. You should probably kill it, and if it's like, and if it's no, we're not particularly far down the road with them, and it's somewhat accidental that it sounds like it's written with a competitor, okay, great. Like now you understand better what their needs are and you can pursue it. Now, the thing about all of these is that none of these people were killing the deal when they were only talking about price. They were like giving them their pricing and kept trying to schedule a demo with them. Like, right when they couldn't get an executive in the room, they were having the next meeting and the meeting after that and the meeting after that. When the RFP was written like with a competitor in mind, they were never asking them this question. They were just continuing down as if this was just fine. And once we did this, they all sort of realized like, oh, these are all really bad signals. We should be doing something about this. And it allowed them to get out of deals quicker. When the CEO was like, what happened? They could be like, we couldn't get a decision maker in the room. It was stupid. They only wanted to know about price. And like it was done. And then in deal review, sales leader was like, so what's the state of the situation? Have they gotten a demo yet? Did you get a decision maker in the room yet? And like now everybody's kind of on board with this. And now you don't get that same identity ding from walking away from an opportunity that isn't worthwhile because you've already pre-agreed to that. Right. And so this allows you to start spending your time on things that are worthwhile. Right. And get you out of this idea that if I'm the one who walks away, that somehow I have failed. Because it's not true. If you walk away from something that isn't worthwhile, that is success. It will get you to where you want to go faster. You will make more money and you will have a better life.
Mm-hmm. The art of quitting.
The art of quitting. And by the way, as you said, like it's true in poker, right? Like if I pursue a hand that isn't worthwhile because it mathematically is losing, I will lose all my money. And it's so amazing because you hear people at the table all the time say, well, I couldn't fold because I had so much money in the pot. And it's like, okay, but if I had just sat you down and said, I'm going to hand you this hand, would you like to play it from here? The answer would be no. Like this is a losing hand. I'm not putting money in the pot in the future. Like that's ridiculous. But they would literally say out loud, I had too much money in the pot. I couldn't fold.
Yeah,
It's like,
that's a really, really, really great point you make there.
yeah.
So, all right. I know you have another book coming up. I know you can't talk about it yet, but
It's
I
not
know
that I can't talk about it. I did talk about it a little with the Ted Lasso thing that is in the new book. So it's about how to understand what data actually means, like information actually means, right? So, if your inbound top of funnel looks like X, you do some marketing and it explodes. What does that mean? Does it mean that the marketing strategies increased your?
right. You had a great example from COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Exactly.
need more information.
What do you like to do the most? Do you like to coach? You like to do speaking? What's your favorite thing to do when you engage a client?
So there's two things that I really, 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 really love. And they're actually the same thing. So I love teaching, and I do teach. So I taught at Wharton for 7 years. I now teach on a platform called Maven. It's a 3-week course that I offer 3 times a year on decision making, a lot of the things that we've talked about here. I teach in my class. It's a very practical class. It's not theoretical. I mean, there's some theory, but it's really like, what are the science-backed strategies? Like what we just talked about are called kill criteria, right? They only talked about price, kill it. Like, when are you walking away? Like, these are very practical things that you can do to actually improve your outcomes. So I do that. It's on a platform called Maven. My next class is actually coming up in October. And I love that. Like I love teaching so much. I love when I'm talking about something and I put, something out there and someone just, you can see, the bell goes off, right? Like, that's just the best thing ever. Right. So I love that. And I really love my consulting work with clients. They're bringing me interesting problems. It's not the same problem over and over again. And it's very poker-like, I have to think about what are the things that I know? What are the issues that they're having? How do I actually think about helping them to solve this problem for themselves? It's a lot of kind of thinking on your feet. And I just love that. But guess what? That's teaching. So mostly I just love teaching. That's really what it comes down to. And so in terms of my professional time, that's really what I spend my time on. Even obviously, if I'm writing a book, it's teaching. And
What's the name of the course again, or the courses?
the course is called, what is the name of the course? I think it's called Better Decisions. But anyway, you can look up Annie Duke on Maven. And this is going to be my 11th or 12th cohort. I think it's cohort-based learning, lots and lots of breakouts. There's an alumni group that continues on. So you get to actually talk to people who've taken the class, and they meet quarterly, which I think is awesome. Makes me so happy. So I know that, and I actually attend, actually they meet monthly and I attend quarterly after the fact. So that's really nice to be able to continue to connect with the people who've taken the class before. And that I do that. I usually do it about 3 times a year. I do that. So the consulting is just like I think exercises that poker muscle for me a little bit more, where it's like, there's some things that are the same about the situation, but lots of things that are different in the details. And how do you actually think through a problem kind of in real time, which I really, really love. And then obviously writing a book is teaching. So, but my dad was a teacher, so I guess it's in my blood. I couldn't avoid it. It was destiny.
Well, it was great to have you on. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and I learned a lot. And I love that. You made me think.
Oh, well, you made me think. You had very good thoughts and examples and questions. So I like it when I have to think.
Love it. Well, thank you for being on.
Well, thank you for having me.
Annie and I covered a lot today, and I really enjoyed our conversation. But what I want you to hold on to coming away from our conversation is this. The stories we tell ourselves about our own wins and losses are rarely ever the full picture. When something is going well, we assume it's because we're doing something right, and we rarely stop to ask if we could be doing something even better. The same is true for the people we're selling to. When a prospect resists a change that would actually help them, it's not because they're being difficult. It's because as a human being, we're wired to weigh what we might lose more heavily than what we stand to gain. Once you understand that, you can stop trying to convince prospects to see things your way and start asking them the questions that will get them thinking about what things could actually look like a year from now. Remember, helping your prospect make a decision for change can only happen if they base that decision on the future version of themselves, whether it's 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, or 1 year. That's our episode for today. If you're enjoying Breaking Sales, we'd love for you to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcast or Spotify, and subscribe to our YouTube channel if that's where you're listening. Until next time.